So I'm going to answer some questions here. This is a question about those two lines that you see a lot in the suttas, and we have in our chanting, Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. And it asks, if it's Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, why not Sabbe Sankhara Anatta? Well, Sabbe Sankhara Anatta is true, of course, because Sabbe is all. Sankhara are conditioned things. Anything that's pulls together things to be created or is based, dependent upon other things, other conditions. That's sankhara. And anicca is impermanent. So all sankharas, everything that is put together based on other conditions, falls apart because those conditions change. So they are all impermanent. And it's also true that Sabbe Sankhara Anatta, they are all not self. But that's not what the Buddha said, because he was making a bigger point. Sabbe Dhamma Anatta, because Dhamma means everything. Not just the conditioned, but also the unconditioned. So all Dhamma, all Dhammas are not self. There's no self in the created, there's no self in the uncreated. There's no self in the conditioned, there's no self in the unconditioned. No individual self, no separate self, no identity, self-identity. No one that we see here in the room, no one that we think we are, lifetime after lifetime. There's no self like that in the unconditioned or the conditioned. And why is the self not considered real? Because it's anicca. I mean, it's real on a conventional level. Here we are. You know, in conventional reality, there are lots of living beings, all different kinds of things, but then they all fall apart. So this idea of self is by definition an abiding, lasting entity. And why is that? This is the same idea whenever you hear about a soul. You know, there's some everlasting aspect to a self. The self is everlasting, unchanging. And so that's why none of this can be self. And in other religions, also at the time of the Buddha, the idea was, well, there is some abiding self that goes from one lifetime to the next. And this is one of the things that the Buddha saw and said, absolutely not. That's not how it works. And I think from my perspective, what I notice in that is that there's this very strong ego-based determination to protect this entity, this thing that I think is myself. And that ego, we want to think that that ego is gonna keep getting perpetuated into the future. And it's an enormous, massive suffering. Now the Buddha didn't say this, that there's no abiding self that keeps reincarnating. He didn't say that because it's suffering. He said it because it doesn't work that way. But that's not, we may not see that entirely until there is full awakening. The question here, though, after that one, why is the self not considered quote-unquote real because it is anicca? Is it because Nibbana is the opposite, unchanging? Yeah, in a way, because that which doesn't change, the unconditioned, it doesn't change because someone realizes Nibbana. It's not like the self goes into Nibbana. That is also something you see in other religions. The idea, there was a chant that we used to do in the yoga tradition, I am a bubble, make me the sea. Like the sea is full of these bubbles that we are, and at some level you can say, well, it's the same thing, except that I think the Buddha was really wanting, he really saw that we keep carrying this suffering with us as long as we believe in this entity continuing on, and that it really doesn't bear out as truth. Could the self be real but changing through this life and future lives? Again, same idea. Is this a truth, self as anicca and Nibbana as unchanging, that the Buddha realized? Yes. Is there a sutta that discusses Nibbana as unchanging? Yeah, it's mentioned a lot. I don't have an idea of a specific one that that I can tell you about right at the moment, but like I said, those two lines appear in many places, for example, and the Buddha talks about the Nibbana as the unconditioned in many places. Does doing a good deed in order to feel good about it mean that I am coming from the sense of self instead of the Dhamma? Doing good for the sake of doing good, how do you do that? So I think the answer to the first question is yes. I think that when we do good, we need to be very attentive to our intention. And if we're doing it because we like the good feeling, or we want something in return, we want to be noticed, or we want people to repay us later or treat us well or whatever it is, if that's our intention, then it's not just good for the sake of good. It does diminish the value, you might say. I remember once I attended a teaching of the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in San Jose, in the San Jose Convention Center, and this room was enormous. There were tens of thousands of people there. And I was way in the back, and you could see he was that big, big screens with him showing on, so we could see from way back there. But one of the things he said is that if I do this, if I give this teaching with any idea of getting something from it, I ruin it. And it's like, yeah, when we practice observing our mind and our intentions, and we can see it, we can catch that. It's a different feeling than giving without any thought of ourself. And so for the sake of doing good, just, that sense that it's good to do good. And it's You do feel joy, you do feel happiness, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a natural result. But monitoring that sense of self, getting involved, so that we can direct our mind away from that. Do tranquility and equanimity have a similar tone or quality? Well, they're certainly both very calm, but tranquility, my sense of tranquility is that the Buddha taught, well, he talked about the tranquility of the body and tranquility of the mind. And my feeling of it is, this deep calm. But then when equanimity, even though it's very calm, it's also got this incredible stability. Like, it's equanimity because it faces every kind of distraction, upheaval, good, bad, everything without wavering. It's got a real wisdom base. So someone once said every list that the Buddha made, there's at least one or more wisdom qualities there in the list. And when I look at the 7 factors of awakening, I think there are 2 that could be considered wisdom qualities, as opposed to samatha qualities that are calming or something else. So when I look at, mindfulness often has wisdom along with it, but the awareness, just being present with whatever it is, I wouldn't necessarily name that one as a wisdom quality on its own. But Dhamma investigation, I would say, is a wisdom quality. And tranquility, I wouldn't think of as a wisdom quality, even though it's extremely calm. But equanimity is a wisdom quality, because its stability comes from knowing that there's nothing to get ruffled about here, no matter how crazy it is, or wild it is, or weird it is, or whatever. So that's what I think is the distinction there. Could you please explain or consider what was meant in the sutta about Cultivating, where the white cloth given to him by the Buddha facilitated his enlightenment? How did he realize impermanence? So the Buddha gave him the cloth, and the Buddha told him to reflect upon impurity. So this cloth is a clean white cloth. It was a foot wiping cloth. It wasn't a fancy cloth. It was, something they would lay down to wipe your feet if you go into the hall. But it was clean. And as he rubbed it, the oil from his hands made it dirty. And just like with so many other examples you see in the suttas or in the verses of the enlightened monks or the enlightened nuns, something happens. It doesn't inherently bring enlightenment, but something clicks because you see this phenomena. He saw that it was getting dirty, and he was thinking about impurity, and he realized from that everything is impermanent. And it's not logical. It's just, this is how some of these things happen. One of the bhikkhunis put out the wick in the lamp, and when the light went out, she got it. Another one poured the water from washing her feet down onto the ground and saw it going down the hill, and she got it. Ananda, Venerable Ananda, was trying so hard, they say, the night before the conference, I call that when 500 Arahant monks came together to blanking. She reads my mind and then she reads the blank, and it's just poor thing. Council, the first council. Thank you. He was invited to the council because he was the one who knew all of the Dhammas, all of the suttas. He had an incredible memory, but he had not yet realized Nibbana. He was not an Arahant. And all of the other ones were Arahants. And he was really putting in the effort, really, going for it. And then he just was like, okay, I'm exhausted. I've got to go to bed. And he said, he was going to lie down, and before he hit the pillow, in midair, it hit him, and he awakened. Go figure. So you never know. Sometimes when I'm in samadhi, I have very strong sensations. Pressure on my third eye area and or root chakra. How should I approach this? Ignore, try to relax, focus elsewhere, other. Sometimes the pressure can come from being tight, from trying too hard. Not necessarily for that, but yeah, finding a way to relax is a really good idea. Notice if you stay with it and you watch it in a way that's relaxed, just observing, see if it changes, how it does. Yeah, I think it's, usually what happens when, I'm working with something and, it's something unusual I haven't heard of before, I haven't experienced before, then I might try all of these things that you mentioned, just try something and see how it is. And it may not matter in a sense, but I would mainly pay attention to how you're holding your meditation object. And if there's too much intensity, that can be a source of this kind of thing. A lot of times we're based on the descriptions of samadhi, of practice, of having an object and, really going for the one-pointedness, and it can have a very strong kind of feeling like encouraging us to be very tight and focused down on something, and that actually isn't very helpful. And it can lead to this kind of thing. So I'm not sure if that's the issue. Another thing, of course, you could try is some qigong or some tai chi or some yoga to see if you can work with those two chakras in particular, or all of them, and see if you can help them balance ahead of time or in between your sits. How would you suggest directing thoughts, intuition, when advised during a guided meditation to let go? I think that kind of instruction is really about relaxing and, looking at what Buddha's descriptions of the process of meditation, whether it's the definitions in the texts of the jhanas or certain even also mindfulness of in and out breathing, what you see is a movement towards more and more relaxation and more letting go. And I think it really is, like noticing anything that you're holding, any place that's tight. Again, even in your focus, in your posture, and relax. That's how I see it. Can you say more about practicing with internal silence for someone new to it? How do you relate with external sounds? Can you practice in a noisy environment with this object? If you have a faint inner sound of silence, will it get more prominent in experience with practice? Okay, so the way I was introduced to the sound that might in yoga is called the nada sound. I know that Ajahn Sumedho has talked about that he hears a hum, and even though he called it the sound of silence, but he said, it's not really a sound. I mean, it seems like a sound internally, but it's not made from, some physical thing happening that produces a vibration. So the way I was introduced to it was when I was attending a class on meditation at this place where I eventually did the seminary training, and the person teaching this beginning meditation class mentioned this sound that you might hear when you meditate. And it's just in your ear. It's not coming from anywhere else. And I went home and I thought, I wonder if I can hear this. And I can't remember if she instructed this or if I just did it kind of. I put my hand over my ear. And it kind of resembles putting a shell by your ear. And, it's like you can hear the ocean. And that's what kind of opened that up for me, to hear that internal sound. And then what I realized as I would be meditating is that when I wanted to, I could hear it. If I didn't put my attention there, I wouldn't notice it. But whenever I would want to, if I would turn my attention to that sound, I could hear it. And if I stayed focused on it, if I stayed attentive to it, it would get louder. And when I go deeper into meditation, it would get louder. And it was extremely comforting. I really, I used it as a meditation object along with my breath for quite a long time. And then I went to Thailand for the first time. And in talking with especially the junior monks there, they're like, yeah, that's not a thing. I'm like, oh, okay. But I remember being kind of, I don't know, it disturbed me when, not the monks, but the cicadas were so loud in the forest that I couldn't distinguish this inner sound from that external sound. And I was like, oh no, because I was really using this as a security blanket. I could go there anytime and feel calm, and it's like, kind of like easy touch into the spiritual. And anyway, so it was interesting, and then I kind of stopped using it for a while, and then listening to Ajahn Sumedho, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, I get that. That's cool. I think that the way of practicing could be just something like that, just maybe with cupping your ear and just seeing if there's anything there, but not looking for it in any kind of determined way. Ajahn Sumedho said that one time he was teaching a retreat at Amaravati, and this woman was wanting so much to get the sound of silence, and she was trying so hard, and of course this is completely counterproductive to having anything happen. So he felt bad, he's like, how do you help encourage people to notice things without giving them the idea that it's some kind of goal or achievement? And so I would just see what happens. And how do you relate with external sounds? So generally for me, I might, under some rare circumstances, I might put attention on an external sound for some reason. Like one time the gutter was doing a drip, drip, drip. And it was like, if you put your attention on that, it'll drive you batty. But I was noticing this. First of all, I was leading meditation, so there's a room full of people, and I'm like, oh God, the gutter, and then I turned my attention away from it, and I had to work at that. It was really annoying and loud. And I turned my attention away from it, and it was really interesting because it caused me to go deeper inside. It was a very powerful meditation. So that's kind of how I relate to external sounds. It can really vary. Can you practice in a noisy environment with this object? Yes, because there is really a distinction between the internal sound and external sound. And the external sounds can fade more into the background. We've had a lot of noisy environments to practice in with, the Portuguese Center right on the other side of our block, and, the music and and living in the little apartment building with the neighbors with their TV blasting, and just that's okay. It makes you a better meditator. If you have a faint inner sound of silence, will it get more prominent in experience with the practice? Yeah, probably. Just noticing it lightly, kind of in a friendly way, not trying too hard, and it is very likely to get more prominent. Okay. Why do arahants stick around instead of just entering parinibbana? I know this was written on behalf of a friend. Well, there are a few reasons, I think. One is to be of benefit to people and devas, and not to do anything to hasten the end of their physical body. I mean, there are stories in the suttas where a monk who is an arahant will use the knife as their way of saying it. But that's not normally what happens. Monastics or whoever, arahants, just allow the body to naturally take its course, its karmic course, which we all have that reality of the body needing to wind down its karma before it goes. And they're much more likely to let that unwind and do good. Even if they don't do much externally in the world, there's a lot of good that they do psychically, just being in the world. And of course, you have like the Buddha, he made a determination to renounce the life principle and said he would die in 3 months. He had that control, that power. But he also said that his body was really, really painful, really aching, like an old cart held together with straps, and when I hear these stories about how people were upset with Ananda that he didn't pick up the cue, that if the Buddha was asked to stay longer, he would stay longer, and maybe even very, lots longer, and I think, wow, where's the compassion? Who wants to have this really, really painful body continuing on and on and on and on because somebody can't let me go? Come on, guys. Get with the program. Let go, let go. It's okay. You can do this. And that's exactly what he was telling them all the time for the next 3 months. You have to be an island unto yourself. You have the Dhamma, and you can do this. And it's going to be okay without me here. And we still can do this. And there are still people realizing Nibbana, realizing the end of suffering, and it's here available for all of us. It's amazing. But it helps a lot to have the Arahants here to give us that example. People come with us to Thailand, and sometimes what happens is that they get that this really is what happens. There really are Arahants. I feel it's so heartbreaking when I hear about whole traditions of monastics even who don't believe it's possible in this day and age to realize Nibbana. And it's like, wow, how depressing and untrue. Why do Arahants still meditate and practice Brahmaviharas if they're already in the highest happiness? Well, it's not for their own happiness. Well, it is, actually. The Buddha talked about samadhi and jhana as a pleasant abiding here and now. Why not have a nice pleasant abiding here and now? The Brahmaviharas, of course, for the benefit, the metta that you feel from some of these people like Ajahn Ganha or Ajahn Chandi, it's just so inspiring and beautiful, and the practice of the Brahmaviharas and the development of that can be just so inspiring, so helpful to people. And also, and I forgot what I was going to say. Maybe that will come back. Can you think of anything? What else was I going to say? What?
Something about the pure abodes, maybe?
The pure abodes. Oh, no. We were talking about this before. A lot of times Arahants stayed around a long time and continued the same practices because they wanted to inspire and encourage the future generations. There's a very good story about this with a Mahakassapa. He was really a tough guy. And he lived up this mountain, and every day to go get his food, he would have to come down this mountain and back up again. And his verses in the Therigatha are just beautiful. And he would say, "Oh, the peacocks make, and the elephants trumpeting, and the blue, and I love this Rocky Mountain." There's just so much like joy in it all, right? So, but when he got really old, and it's harder to get around, especially up and down this mountain and living in such austere conditions, because he just, was super austere. The Buddha said, "Kassapa, come live near me, like you're older now. Come live near me, and, it's easier to get food, and and Kaspa's like, "No, I'm not gonna." And he said, I want to inspire future generations to see that they can do this. Okay? So that's one reason. And tomorrow will be about like all the other days, except your mind might not be quite like all the other days. I don't know. Since it's our last full day together. And the plan I have in my mind is that I'll give a Dhamma talk tomorrow night, and give you a chance to ask questions as they come up afterwards, since we'll be starting to talk again the next day anyway. Just so you know, you'll have another chance if you have questions. Especially what I'm thinking of talking about is your true nature, and Dhamma, and Nibbana, and we'll see how that goes.